Hey, how's it going, YouTube? What we got here today is YZ85 with a kickstart problem. It's the kids across the road. They just bought it earlier this summer or spring for pretty decent price. It was running, and of course, it's a 2003, so it had some issues. Uh, First and foremost, as you can see, nothing. When they bought it, it was kicking over about 1 out of 20 times it might engage, and if you lean it to the left, it'll engage every time. So that right there tells you that most likely the idler gear, one of the rings is gone, and the gear is allowed to slide along on the shaft. Now it won't fall out because it's going to hit the back of the clutch hub and that. But the other problem we got is the oil drain plug is completely stripped out, and they had it siliconed in. Not something you see when the bike's dirty and that when you're looking at it, but buyer beware when it comes to stuff like that. It's a fairly easy fix. All I'm going to do is I think I'm going to tap it out to a larger size and put a bigger bolt in it. We'll have a look once we get the case off anyway. First step's done. The brake lever's got to come out of the way. There's a cotter pin here on the back of this shaft. Right there, and then should be a washer. What I do is I just take this pin out here, again, pin, tiny little cotter, and a washer, and undo the bottom bolt on your brake cylinder and just loosen that one. That allows you to pull it out of the way. That way you don't got to undo the hose or anything and have to re-bleed. Once you do that, you could just pull the brake lever right out. Okay, this one is full of water, which tells me that these rubber seals are shot, and there's not a bit of grease in there at all. Okay, so I'm going to change those washers out and put some grease in for them. Or washers, rubber O-rings. And of course the spring. The spring goes from that little loop there and onto here on the brake lever. Okay, we're going to drain the coolant and the oil next. Alright, bolts are out of the case. Rad hose is off, coolant's drained, oil's just finishing up draining there. It was a rather unusual color. I think they put some oddities in there. There's the bolt that come out. You can see they've done some attempts to make it stay, so it tells me the case is stripped, not the bolt. There's silicone on here. On that end they put Teflon tape and then siliconed over it and then just stuffed the bolt in. And it wasn't like, I pulled it out by hand. I didn't have to turn it at all. So we'll have to see what we can work up here. And again, just to show you the bolts, they're there. That's the drain that goes all the way through. That water pump bolt is the drain. That one there, and that guy there. Okay, you don't need to pull this bolt out or this bolt out. That just holds the water pump housing to the case. And this one's coming off really easy. If, like you can see here, they've put some silicone on. They've had this apart a few times, I'm guessing. You can just tap it with a rubber mallet around. It'll usually pop quite easy. Don't pry on the end of the water pump housing because you can crack the aluminum and then you're going to be shopping around. Alright, so there's the kickstart assembly out. You can see everything's in decent shape and working the way it's supposed to be. The gear sliding fine, all the springs are intact, nothing's broken. Alright, so we'll get that out of the way. That's why I didn't pull the clutch back, because if it was something with that, I can get that in and out without pulling the clutch, which is a little more work. And as I suspected, what's wrong here is this gear. As you can see, look at how much movement that is. Okay, there's supposed to be a clip that holds it back into the case like that. And what's happening here is it's sliding out, so when the kicker comes out, it doesn't come out far enough to engage. And when you lean the bike to the left, it's allowed to slide back in on the shaft, and it works just fine. So we got to pull the clutch pack off and see if The washers and clips and everything are there. Obviously, the clip is gone. Hopefully that's just the extent of it. The clip's about $2. Alright, clutch is off, and as I said, no clip. So as you can see, this just was doing this in behind, and that was our problem. Alright, there should be a washer. There it is right there. Depending on where the lubrication is, it gets sticky, so it'll either come off with the gear or not. The part with the slot, alright, and then there's a flat face. The slotted part goes in for later reference. Of course, as soon as the clip's gone, you got to start looking for it. And I found it jammed up in the gear shifter, which they were actually having problems shifting, and that might have been why. You can see it's bent pretty good. I would definitely not reuse that. And another weird thing that I found, some of you may already see it, there's a rather large washer just sitting down here. Love to know what that's for. It does not do anything with that. So, yeah, interesting. Little treasures you find. Okay, there's our gear back on. There's a flat washer just like this in behind. This one here I couldn't find at first, but it was down here in the belly of the soup. That grayish oil that's down there. So I managed to get it. It's straight and flat and undamaged, so it's still good. There's a clip that I have. That's what fits the shaft. It's the right size. I've got a whole assortment here, but that will cost you about $2 at a dealer, or it's a generic clip, so if you know what size, you could probably go to your hardware store and pick one up. Right? Don't try to put the wrong clip on, because it's just going to cause you grief. Was what happened here when everything falls off and then you got to pull it all apart again. Alright, so there's the finished assembly. You can see now the gear does not slide back and forth on the shaft. There's very little play, just a little bit of wobbly play, and it spins nicely. So that was our problem. A lot of work for the sake of a $2 clip, but you know, that's what happens. Alright, the last thing I was going to look at was the drain bolt, which is stripped down into the case here. So that's not part of this video. This was about the Kickstarter, so I will deal with that and assemble this thing. I'm going to put the kicker back together here. There's this dog here in the back. Alright, there should be a little washer right there, and this goes just into there. The dog, you see right here, goes into that groove. When your kicker's released, it should stop up here against the case, and it, you know, it'll do that on its own. There's nothing you really got to line up, and it moves back into here. This spring where my thumb is goes into here. Alright, and then you rotate this one last, and it goes into that hole. It's a two-handed job. As you can see, there's a lot of lining up, so I'm going to put the camera down and I'll show you when it's all together. So there it is. You can see the dog in the back. And the spring is in its little slot, and the reason that is because when the gear comes out, it's not lining up here, but when the gear comes out, alright, that slides in and out onto this, in that little channel. The last thing here is to put this spring, and I just got to rotate it around and cram it into that hole right there. Alright. Okay, so you got a thin spacer on the input shaft here. You got a collar. The collar may or may not stay inside the clutch hub, but it, just so you're aware, it does come out. Okay, make sure that's all in, and that spacer just clears the gear here, so you don't need to pull the gear off to get it out. In the clutch hub here, you got, in this case, is a bushing on the YZ85. My other bike, it's a roller bearing. Okay, so that just goes on, and you got to kind of spin it to line up the final drive gear there. Alright, and it'll kind of, you can see, the idler and the final drive are both turning, and it's in. You know it's in when that spacer, which is the inner part, is perfectly flush with this part of the clutch hub. Right, then you have a thick spacer, but it's about twice the thickness of the other one. That goes on. Then your clutch center goes on. Washer. And your nut. Okay, so there's the clutch all packed. Just remember it's steel, spacer, friction disc, blah 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 all the way out. You should end up with a friction disc here. Your clutch rod. There's a little ball bearing that's inside the input shaft because that's hollowed out in the rod on the other side. That works on the clutch lever. And of course that goes in. Make sure you don't lose the ball. This shouldn't sit flush. It should be out just a bit. If that's sitting flush, you probably lost the ball. You need to go looking for it. Last thing on these, there is a timing thing for the cover. Alright, you notice there's these little circles. And there's one that's going to have a triangle in it. That triangle lines up with that circle here. You can put this on 5 different ways, but what happens is these splines have to line up into the air. If they don't, it's not going in far enough and your clutch is just going to slip. So you have to line up the dot with the triangle, and it takes a little wiggling sometimes to get it to go. Like that. Okay, triangle and dot, and it goes in all the way. You can feel it when it clicks in. Alright, and it's flush. You can see the packs aren't moving. If you put it in the wrong way, you'll be able to move your friction discs. Alright, so it's a matter of putting the springs on now, torquing them all down to, I think it's 7.2 foot-pounds. I'll get that down here. Okay, side case is back on. I just wanted to point out one thing. 2 different types of bolts here. Majority are the shorties. Okay, they go around here. The long one goes right there. Okay, so in front of the filler plug above the water pump drain, and I got that one fixed up. Threaded out new threads into the case. They weren't that bad. It was just the very end threads that were gone, and they were actually making matters worse. This is what I had pulled off of the thing. They had about 20 feet of Teflon tape. That's only a small bit of it, as some kind of a washer, which was forcing the bolt farther out, and they weren't reaching decent threads. So by getting rid of it, I cleaned up the edge of the case here that they had mangled, and the bolt threaded in fine. Brake lever, some new rubbers, and a coat of grease. Pack some grease in the hole there. You know, can never put too much grease, I find. We'll jam that all back together. Alright, same thing. Put the spring back. Tighten our bolts down, put our 2 pins back in. Cotter pin and washer here, pin and cotter pin there. Alright, all together, ready to go. Let's see.